Hey everyone, welcome back to Ahead of the Curve. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Teed, and today we're diving into a question I get all the time. I know I say this quite often, pretty much all the time. Which side do I stretch with scoliosis? And it sounds like it should be a really simple answer. So, like, just stretch the tight side. But with scoliosis, it's a three-dimensional condition, so it's a lot more nuanced than just stretch your tight side. And if you've ever tried to just stretch your tight side or just stretch and you felt worse or more unstable afterwards, this episode might give you a little bit more insight as to why that happened. By the end, you'll know how to identify your shortened side, and that's also known as your concave side. So the collapsed side is the concave side. Cave, think of a cave. It's empty, it's hollow. You'll also know where to focus your opening work and how to do it safely so that you don't feel worse afterward. With scoliosis, your spine, it doesn't just purely side bend. So if you look at an x-ray, you're not getting the whole picture of what your spine is doing because you can only really see that side to side curve, that side bend. But it also, in addition to that side bending, it also rotates and it compresses. This means one area is shortened and rotated inward. That's your concave side. This is if you're looking at yourself from the back. So you'll notice the side that's more collapsed, it's rotated forward and it's shortened. And the other side, it's lengthened and stretched, but it's a little bit more weak in some ways. They're both weak, which makes this complicated. Both sides are weak in different ways. So the weak side, the convex side is also a weak side. So if you simply just pull or stretch towards the long side, that can kind of make things a little bit unstable. Instead of stretching, I like to use the term opening or lengthening or elongating because it's more controlled, it's more supportive, and it doesn't feed into the collapse. Let's talk about how to find the areas that actually need to be opened on your back. So if you go in front of a mirror, check for skin folds or creases in your skin. They're often located with the most common curve types at your rib cage and at your waistline. So there's usually like a few different areas that are collapsed. So stand in front of a mirror, look at your rib cage, look at your waist, and the side that looks like it's caved in, where it has less space in between your ribs and your pelvis. This is your concave side. And then the side that sticks out or it feels stretched or lengthened, a lot of people say like, oh, it's really strong, or, that's my tight side because they see these ropey muscles sticking out. That's actually your convex side. Another way is to feel how things feel when you're breathing. So when you're breathing, your concave side, it often feels like it's more sticky and it doesn't expand as easily. And then the convex side, it feels like, man, this is no problem. And it just really inflates quite easily, especially as you inhale. And a way to test that or feel that on yourself is to take your hands, have your fingers in the front of your rib cage and your thumbs wrapped behind the rib cage like a cup at the side. If you can see me here, I'm kind of, if you're watching on YouTube, and my fingers in the front, and then my thumb is in the back. And then as I take an inhale, I'm feeling what areas like to expand. So just take a nice inhale and see. All right, first I'm asking the question, is my right side or my left side expanding in general more? And for me, my right side, I know this about myself already, but that side expands more than my left side. And then the second question you want to ask is, okay, now I've identified my left side isn't expanding as much. Now, do I expand more? Sorry, let's talk about less. Do I expand less in the front or less in the back as I inhale? And I expand less in the back. Sorry, my cat, if you can hear her crying, she's trying to join in and she likes to rub herself all over the laptop and then knock it off my desk while I'm trying to record. So if you ever see things shaking or hear her crying, I'm trying to get her to get out of the way. So before I was interrupted, my left side in general expands less than my right. And then the back part of my left side of my rib cage expands less than the right. Okay. Now I'm going to use the most common curve type pattern as an example. And this will work probably for, I don't know, probably 70% of you. So the most common curve type is a right thoracic and a left lumbar curve. So that means your right middle back and your left low back have the curves, the main prominence. So if you're looking at yourself from behind, the left mid back will need to be focused on the opening. Okay. And then the right lower back, the lumbar region, will need to have some focus on opening or lengthening. So those are the two concave parts: cave, collapsed, empty, hollow spots. And then if you're looking at yourself from the front, your right rib cage, so like kind of like the front of the chest or like underneath your breast, that area is generally collapsed. And then the left hip flexor oblique area, so like the front of the left hip, that's another area that's collapsed. So this is why it's not quite as simple as just side bend, stretch the other way, or just stretch this side or that side. It's often more nuanced because not only are there usually more than one curve in a scoliotic spine, but there's more than one area that's collapsed because it's three-dimensional. So there's actually, in reality, at least usually 4 areas. If you have 2 curves, there's 4 areas that are collapsed. Yeah. So how to safely open these areas. And one of those that I've talked about before is the myofascial release, or MFR. I like to shorten it as MFR because saying myofascial release over and over again gets a little tiring. Again, we want to identify your skin folds or your creases. Most common curve type: left middle back, right lower back if you're looking at yourself from behind, or right rib cage, front of the rib cage, and then left hip, front of the hip if you're looking at yourself from the front. Once you find those collapsed areas or the skin folds or the creases, you've identified the areas that have fascial dehydration. So that outward skin crease is an inward sign of fascial dehydration. I prefer that people use yoga tune-up balls or a courageous ball to just grabbing any small firm ball because you can actually kind of hurt yourself with like a lacrosse ball or something that has a really hard core inside of it. The tune-up balls, that whole line of balls by Jill Miller, they have a bit of a give to them and they're more forgiving, especially for people with, these areas that are a bit more sensitive. They're already collapsed. So if you're using something super, super firm on an area that's already collapsed, that can create more problems for you. That's why I prefer these types of balls. And then I also prefer them to something like a foam roller. Foam rollers, they only reach the top layers of the fascia because it's such a big surface area that it's covering. So it's not allowing itself to nestle into the nooks and crannies of the curve. And it's not allowing itself to nestle into those deep, deep layers of the fascia, which is what the whole point of this is. And you want to spend, once you find those spots, you want to spend about 3 to 5 minutes per spot, letting the pressure sink in, letting the release happen. So we're not moving and wiggling around the whole time. We're posting up at one spot. It can be nice if you find an area that's tender, but that's just not always the case. You may get to that spot and it's like, oh gosh, this doesn't really feel like a whole lot. But if you have identified that as a collapsed area, it still needs some attention. So we're not wiggling around. We're finding the spot, we're posting up and allowing that ball to sink into the deep layers of the fascia. And you're using like just very calm breathing while you're in that position. We're not tensing up our face or tensing up other muscles. We're actually trying to bring an effect of relaxation throughout the body. If you are doing it correctly, generally afterwards you will feel really relaxed and you may want to take a nap. This is something that can be nice to do before bed. It's a nice nervous system unwinding situation that happens. But when you let that pressure sink in, then you release the pressure like a sponge soaking up the water. That's what essentially happens with the myofascial release, which is pretty cool. Another way to open up those collapsed areas is to use props. And I like to use scoliosis wedges. I like the brand Happy So because they're a little bit more firm. So they help you to decompress the collapsed areas and create more space. So you generally will prop behind the areas that are rotated outward, so the opposite side, and then you do some breathing. You can prop under the collapsed areas, and that is like giving yourself like a little bit of a hug. Your curve a hug. You're supporting yourself where it's at. You're taking yourself into those restrictions even more. So that allows those areas to open up and release. There's a supported rest position that I will make sure is linked in the show notes that you can take a look, and it explains how to prop for that unwinding and that opening of the hollow spaces. And then the next way is breathing into the ribs that are collapsed, the waist, the low back, especially on those concave sides. So the areas that are compressed together, we want to restore movement and expansion in those areas. I personally think that doing that laying on your back is the easiest way to start with the 3-dimensional breathing. You can do it side lying. It's a bit more wobbly in that position. You can do it sitting. You can do it standing. It's just you're fighting then against resistance of gravity when you're in those positions. So I think lying on your back, again, cupping your rib cage with your hands can be nice. And then trying to breathe and direct your breath towards the areas that are collapsed together and squished. The next way is movement in all planes of motion. So, very basic example would be if you have the most common curve type, the right thoracic, left lumbar. Here's my scoli spine. I'm not sure how this is showing up for you, but it's a mirror image. But this is the spine from the back. And we have the right thoracic and left lumbar curve. So these are the areas that are convex and rotated outward. And then we have this hollow space here at the left thoracic and the right lumbar. So if you were to take a band, which represents some muscles, and you attach it from the lengthened side. So we go from this spine or this transverse process to this transverse process. And then I hold on to that. And then I go to the opposite side. You'll see how going on the same spot on the other side, how saggy that band is and shortened that band is compared to the other side. Whoop, whoop. And now it's nice and lengthened and long. Okay. I kind of got sidetracked with using this. So if you go and you're thinking again about this most common curve type, and you do a side bending exercise, for example, to the right, you can see how that nicely opens up that left convexity. But then we can't forget about this bottom guy. So you just need to have an awareness that this exists, if it does exist on your spine, so that if you do a side bending activity, that you're not just completely collapsing into that lumbar curve, you're elongating, you're keeping it expanded while you're side bending. So there's just a lot of awareness that needs to happen when you're implementing these movements in all planes. And that's the same goes for rotation and extension and flexion. You need to make sure that if I am doing like a flexion based activity, I'm not completely collapsing into the front of my right rib cage or the front of my left hip. And that I'm not just emphasizing my right rib prominence, that I'm keeping my left ribs just as expanded as my right ribs. There's so many things that you need to be thinking about and aware of when you're going through all these exercises when you have scoliosis. So let me put this guy down. Kind of just wrapping up, scoliosis is not simply just about stretching the quote unquote tight side, because honestly, most people can't even identify which side is their tight side. They think that they know, but it may feel like it's more tight than the other side, but it's actually the rotation that's happening. So it's not just stretching. It's not just about stretching the tight side. You want to focus on hydrating your fascia. So doing myofascial release, using props, 3-dimensional breathing, and controlled movements in every direction to create space. It's really important that you know your curve and you're able to focus on your shortened or your concave side in order to have the best results. If this helped you to figure out where to focus your stretching or lengthening or opening, you'll love the fall cohort of the Scoliosis Strength Collective. This begins in October, and in the collective, I teach you exactly how to release, open, and strengthen your spine step by step. You can check the link in the show notes and get on the wait list or interest list for the biggest discount. And just make sure that you're not just stretching, that you actually are learning how to move your body in a way that helps your scoliosis. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay well and stay ahead of the curve.